Good morning, everyone, and welcome to what is going to be the last Indica Books open house with Otis for this calendar year, because Otis is going to be taking a break and we all can use the time to go back and put all the wonderful learnings we have had over the course of this year into practice. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Otis. Otis tells me that we have 8 writing samples that have been submitted. So in the time that we have, we'll have to be very judicious about it. I told Otis I'm going to play the spoil sport. So every 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to frantically gesticulate, wave my hands and so on. So with that, I will turn this over to you, Otis.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks for submitting so much work. I enjoyed it. Without further ado, let's get started. Sri Charan, are you with us yet?
I don't see Sri Charan yet among the participants.
Okay, Madhavi, let's start with your piece.
Good morning, Otis.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Great. Okay, let's have you read a little bit here.
Sure. Would you mind sharing the screen?
Yeah, I will share the screen. Let's see, what do I have on my thing? Okay, so let's just read. If you just read the beginning down to here would be great.
The first paragraph.
In the first paragraph, and then do you see the red line?
Oh. The lush green surroundings. The lush green surroundings had little effect on the frayed nerves of the two men. Deriving emotional strength from each other's presence and finding solace in their idiotic bantering, they crossed over the perimeter into an unknown territory. It could end up any way. They were aware of the dangers lurking around them, both the seen and the unseen. Then there was a lingering fear of arriving a little too late to save their beloved Saundarya. There was another possibility of not finding her here at all, and despite that nagging fear at the back of their mind, they were doing their best not to think about it. Each wanted to convince himself and the other that she was here and that she was safe. They were here to rescue her and take her home with them. When I find her, I'm going to tutor her on door locks. This girl doesn't even know how to lock her doors properly. Prasanna swore under his breath. Sure, and I will make sure she survives your lectures, retorted Aman. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Prasanna inquired.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe you could tell us a little bit about this piece. What's your plan for it, and so we can understand.
Actually, it's a part of a long story that I'm writing right now. If you remember, I had submitted a few pieces earlier. It's about 3 main characters: Aman, his uncle Prasanna, and Aman's friend Saundarya. Aman is a postgraduate student who has come back home on vacation on Christmas break, and he doesn't get along well with his uncle. They end up fighting every now and then. And Saundarya tries to make peace between the two. So in this particular, actually, this is starting of a new chapter. In the previous chapter, there was a lot of action, like both of them again get into some argument, and Prasanna ends up telling his nephew to get out. And he takes it literally, packs his bag off and goes away. Then Saundarya ends up getting kidnapped. And the uncle then contacts Aman, who is stranded on a bus on a highway. The bus is broken down, but then he manages to come back, and how they team up and then go on searching for her. They find some clues and end up at this farmhouse.
Yeah,
the relative's farmhouse. So all this happens.
Right.
This is the start of the chapter. So basically, why I wanted to send you this piece was, since last few times we were talking about scenes and summary and scene, I'm treating this as a kind of a summary. So my question was, should we start with a summary in a chapter and whether this fits the summary category. And
Okay.
yeah,
Well, let me start by saying that I do really appreciate all the action you bring to a story. So like there's
yeah, I
you
know
do
it's
not hesitate.
kind of ODD right now
Yeah, it's
because it's my first
there
draft.
is a
Yeah, a lot of revisions.
lot of action,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate that you concentrate on really having things happen. I'm not sure that I would call this the summary, really the
Oh,
summary that maybe you're thinking of, or maybe that I was thinking of. This does seem very much like a scene. It's
okay.
really a protracted scene where they go to the farmhouse and then they enter the farmhouse and then et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about that, but I do appreciate that you put us into the action and you let the action speak. I mean, you're a little bit like Elmore Leonard, who says,
Oh,
they're like, "How do you write so well?" And he's like, "It's easy. I just leave out all the boring bits, right? So you leave out all the boring stuff and you just concentrate on the action." Um, the thing I think that this well, I'm not sure about the piece generally, but this section does not seem to decide whose story we're telling. And there's a little hint that I get when we use this word they.
yeah.
We know that we're not getting a singular point of view.
Yeah,
We're
because
not
this is
getting
the
one person.
first time that they are coming together to do something. They have a common interest for very first time.
But Javi, I don't want to argue with you. No, I know I will lose the argument. So you
Uh-huh.
can already walk away from this victorious and know that you've succeeded. The the point that I make about point of view is this. So like I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it this morning. Whatever. I always wake up thinking about this stuff, I guess. Um, the story, right, that we write, a guy and his uncle and a young woman and she gets abducted, that story that goes through, right? That is in a sense a given. Okay, I want everyone here to listen to this. Our story is a given, right? It's a given that we have a good story. We know that we can walk into an elevator, for example, and we can pitch our good story. A guy is returning for Christmas to his estranged, wife and children, and he arrives at this large tower in, wherever in Singapore, and it's been taken over by terrorists. Okay, so we know that we can pitch the story right in the elevator. The story is just the first level. That's one thing that we have to realize. Yes, it takes us a long time to rise to the level of writing a good story, and I try to suggest in some ways how we might construct a good story, and the beginning and the middle and the end, and what happens in terms of the journey of the story and all of that stuff. So I've done a lot of talk about that. So it takes us a lot to rise up to that level. But finally, when we're going to publish, we're basically going to try to publish our story versus everyone else's story. So they also have a good story. Everybody has a good story. The question is, what is going to be the reader's experience of that story? I'm really trying to send this out to everyone. I hope you're all like nodding your head like crazy. Okay, so having a story is just the first level. Everybody that is trying to publish something has a story. I mean, maybe. The ones that don't are chucked away immediately. If you don't have a story, no one's even looking at it. Okay, so the story is the first level. Then what is the experience of that story? What is the reader's experience of that story? And the reader's experience of that story is, I'm arguing, heightened when the reader is able to basically walk a mile in the shoes of the character in the story. That's the simplest way to put what I'm trying to say. The reader gets to have the experience of the story. The experience of the story is two things. It's absolutely unique. It's not an experience that the reader has ever had before, right? It's a unique world, a unique character, all of these things, but the impetus of the story is universal, meaning it's one that the reader understands completely, which means it's a struggle of the self against the adversity of the world, basically. So that's a lot to say to get to the point of view. To get to the point of you using the word they. Okay? So this is, again, super simple. When you close your eyes, right? You close your eyes, Madhavi, and everyone here closes their eyes. And I say, they walked into the forest, they crossed the river. What do you see in your head? How do you associate with that? We as individuals cannot imagine being a they. This is what I'm saying. We can argue with me if we want to, but I'm just saying that we as individuals, one person, have a lot of trouble imagining being a they. So we can't walk a mile in the shoes of a they. And that's the experience of the story. We can come up with our intellectual arguments. Maravi,
No, I got your point. I understand.
You're like, stop. You know, we can come up with our intellectual arguments about it's the first time that they work together and therefore I use they, right? We can come up with our intellectual arguments to justify everything that we do. This is what our brains are really good for, I think. I think the human brain is like a justifying engine. That's basically all it is. It's a justifying engine. So we can justify it. But I am going to say that, and again, it's for everybody. If you've been wondering all this time why I keep hammering this one issue of point of view, it's because of this. The story is a given. An amazing story is a given. That it takes place on Everest, that people are dying, that people are kidnapped, that people are on a boat, and there's a storm, that, that it's unique and amazing, and all of that stuff is a given. So what makes our story better than someone else's story? The reader experience of that story. That it's very deeply fused is my argument. And not to say that you won't sometimes, there's plenty of readers, there's plenty of writers who will have multiple points of view, but usually when they do it, they're very good at it, right? They'll do all sorts of things. They may even have, Madhavi, they may even have a they here. Okay, so you might write this beginning with a they, and you might do it. But what we want to think about as writers is risk to benefit ratio. When we do it, when we diminish the reader's experience by not having a single point of view character, are we really getting something out of it? And we know where I sort of fall about some of this stuff. If we think that what we're getting out of it is this sort of intellectualization, no, please don't. We are driven by emotion. We are driven, we're driven by many things, but not often intellect. Anyway, so that's something to think about, and it's important actually. So when it becomes they here, that actually suggests to me a little bit of a wobble that might exist throughout the entire story, where you may have to think about who is the character that is I think of it this way. They're the vehicle for the reader experience. And it's probably good to have just one, but if let's say you had three, maybe you had the Aman, I think it's the uncle, I'm not positive, but the older guy, and then the young woman. If you wanted to have all 3 points of view, I would do it this way. I would have one point of view in one chapter, one point of view in the other, one point of view in another, because going back to my principle, human beings, the pattern makers, when you teach us a pattern, we learn it. We learn patterns very quickly. So we would understand that you're switching in every chapter. We would expect that. We would get used to even being able to, and granted, you would be writing at a very high level if you could bring the reader into a deep experience of each character, and that each character is different. That would be a high level of writing. You could do that. But I wouldn't mishmash it myself.
Sorry, may I interrupt? Say we have one point of view for a few chapters and then switch the point of view.
So I just go back to sort of simple principles of, human beings are pattern makers. So if we create a pattern that,
We'll have
that the
some
reader
kind of
can't, if the reader can't figure it out, then they're just actually being jerked around. We don't like being jerked. The reader does not like being jerked around. Like, oh, I was in this point of view, and then suddenly it's another point of view. So I wouldn't do that. I mean, or I would try and figure out a clever way to prepare the reader for that eventuality. I mean, it's a little bit complex, but I really try and treat my reader gently, and I use patterns usually to do it. Okay, so I know Abhinav is going to start waving his hands, but I want to say another thing. Okay, Madhavi, you have a lot of action in this story, and there's this section where Aman basically grabs this guard and chucks him over, and he gets knocked out. Okay, Madhavi, I don't know how many brawls you've been in. Let's put it this way: I've been in a couple. Okay, so the only thing I know about them is they don't work out the way you want them to. They've never worked out the way you want them to. Okay, so there's an aspect here of a lack of realism, and when we watch movies, we see this lack of realism all the time. Like I was just watching something. I watch things with my daughters where people get shot. Everyone gets shot and they're dead. That's not actually what happens. I hate to break it to everybody. You actually get injured and you're in incredible pain most of the time. It's very hard. We're a very resilient species. I mean, we have to bleed out. I don't want to talk about all the details of it. But I'm just saying that the issues here in regard to masculine violence, which is sort of what we have depicted, is a little bit idealized and will probably require a little more thinking about it. Another thing that happens also with guys that we don't like anyone to know about, particularly women, is that we're scared to death all the time. And we're scared of getting hurt, and we're scared of things not working out because we know that they don't work out. We know that they don't. This is the one thing we have, so think about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll work it out.
The other thing that occurred to me this morning, again, this is for everybody, but I just think about this stuff. I'm brushing my teeth. But the thing about writers is that we begin to understand the world, it seems to me, and other people by developing a very deep understanding of ourselves. I think that this is one of the things that writers have to do. They basically are going to take this light, rather than looking outward and here maybe like reproducing something that you might have seen in the movies, right? So this seems like a movie scene almost. Instead of doing that and reproducing something that you've seen, you need to turn that thing inward and say, if this were me, what would it be like? What am I like? How would I walk up to this house? How would I approach this guard? What would I be feeling if I were doing it? I think the best writers, they learn everything about the world by looking inward, and then through that lens of deep understanding of the self, then they also look outward. If they don't have that deep understanding of themselves, then they see a man who goes and grabs the guard and goes, okay, that's done, let's go to the next person, right? When we look inward, we realize that that's not how it goes. So I wanted to say that for everybody. Again, underscore, we understand the world by really, really trying to understand ourselves, and we do not give ourselves a break. We have to accept ourselves. We have to accept our foibles. We have to accept that we're frightened. We have to accept that we're duplicitous, that we're conniving, that we're good some of the time. We have to really look, give ourselves an honest appraisal, you know, and then we apply that to the characters that we look out at too. Anyway, I'm very much enjoying this. I am excited to find out what happens. And like I say, I do very much appreciate that you definitely are involved in action. That's great. Okay, shall we? Let's carry on. I'm not sure what this one is. Oh, Jay.
Hi, Otis.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Okay, let's get you to read a little section here. Okay. Jay, let's get you to read this little section here.
Okay. She still measures time in terms of meals. Despite his irritation, Rajan softened. He washed his hands, picked up a plate, and sat at the table. Within moments, he felt his nostrils triggered by the fragrance of the previous day's sambar being heated. His mother spoke. When I was cleaning up after dinner, I was wondering how there was batter left over. Well, everything happens for a reason, I guess. Rajan did not understand the look on her face as she finished the sentence. Was she hinting at something? What did she know? He wondered. But let that thought pass for the moment. After 3 doses, the thought resurfaced. Rajan spoke. Amma, that's enough. Come here, I want to talk to you. He was surprised when she quietly turned the stove off instead of demanding he have more dosas and walked to the table. Amma, sorry I woke you up. I reached Chennai in the evening, but then... Yes, Vishnu told me that you two went to Anu's bachelorette party. That took Rajan off balance. He had expected her to evade the topic, not approach it so directly, including taking Anu's name. Amma, you and Anu, you never liked her. Why? Oh, nothing of the sort. I just didn't like the two of you together, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Jay, tell us a little bit about this story as it's developing so everyone can catch up. And yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay, so this story is about a person who realizes that the person he was in love with is getting married, and that kind of shakes his world up a bit. So he returns home to his hometown where he meets his childhood friend, and the two of them, they head to the girl's bachelorette party. And this part of the story, I mean, this is kind of like the final part of the story where they go to her party and where she says, "Don't ask me why I broke up with you, go ask your father." And so he comes home and he wants to ask his father, and eventually it is revealed through his mother that the girl that he was in love with was potentially his stepsister.
Not even his stepsister, right? I mean, his sister, really.
Sister through another mother.
Right, sharing the same father. Okay, so so this is.
And a sort of a final confirmation comes when he realizes that she too has seafood allergies like he does, which he inherited from his father.
Okay, so I I like this section with the mom. You know, it seems so. If this is towards the end, if it's sort of the explanation, there is a sense of explanation in this scene with the mom, but I do like that you have the two characters sort of interacting here at the end and sort of, but it is a little bit like a Deus Ex Machina. Okay, so do you remember the Deus Ex Machina? So the Deus Ex Machina comes from I love the story of the Italian drama. You know, the play takes place and all these things are happening, and then at the end, this like a moon comes down from the wings, and there's a god or goddess sitting on top of it, and then the goddess sort of explains to everyone what happened and that it's all over. You know, they come in and sort of like wrap it up. That was, you know, 17th century Italian drama. It's kind of frowned upon today, you know, as a device to sort of like make everything work out. You know, the Italian dramatists, they were working like crazy just to get these things produced so that people would come. It was sort of like, you know, the Netflix of Italy. That's funny. I'm funny. So I worry a little bit about that. But when I was reading it, I was sort of like, wait a second, you know, I thought this was going to carry on. I'm like, this is truly a big problem that Jay has thrown in front of this person. Does that make sense? Like, I was like, because this is what we want to do actually with our characters is we take them down a road and we actually confront them with problem after problem after problem. And I'm like, okay, so he's very in love with this woman. She's getting married. He's gone to the town, you know, he's desperately in love with her. And now he also finds out that she's his sister. So I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen after this if it's continuing, right? You might be giving yourself more problems than you want to deal with, or than you can feel that you can deal with. And like you say, you're sort of looking at this as sort of like this is the end. Well, there you go. And that's the answer to the story, and better stop worrying about it. We don't tend to do that. So yeah. So think about it.
All right.
When we have a you know, the classic boy meets girl, boy loses girl story, we don't usually end with, well, she's your sister, you know, like we don't usually end with that, because that's like, okay, so it definitely goes against the grain of a long tradition of storytelling. Where the main character basically is, as we say, SOL, or shit out of luck. Okay, so do some thinking about that. Okay, now another thing, when you have, I want to just use this scene as sort of a stepping off point. I think you do a great job of casting a scene, and so this is something you're doing very well, and Madhavi is doing very well. You're basically doing things in action. Madhavi in her work is actually, she has action just taking place going forward. You do have this scene as a kind of explanation scene. It's almost like, it's basically like having exposition and dialogue. Okay, in fact, it is having exposition and dialogue. Exposition is death. Okay, so generally for all of us as dramatists, exposition is death, but of course in the movies they do it all the time. We know they even make fun of it at this point. You know, like the evil villain will say, what I've done here is I've created a bomb and I've placed it in this place and da 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 da. And what it will do is cause a massive chain reaction that will do this, that, and the other thing. It's like, and the hero is saying, did you just tell me where the bomb was? Yes, I did, but it won't matter because you'll never get out of that chair. I've tied you so tightly, right? So, you know, we've even begun to make fun of this sort of convention of exposition within dialogue. If I were writing exposition and dialogue, I would try and basically disguise it more so. Okay, so like I was thinking about this little scene this morning, but like if I cast it, you know, I would do this, you know, I would have, you know, his home is actually a farm, and what's going to happen is that his mother takes him out and she's going to, you know, do you know anything about chicken sexing? Okay, so they determine the female and the male. So in chicken sexing, they determine the two. I don't even know how it's done, but anyway, I would write that, and I'd have the mother sexing the chickens and putting the females over here to be saved and putting the males over here to be exterminated because they don't need all those male chickens, right? They don't want to feed them. They're not, they're not what
They
they
don't
want.
lay eggs. Yeah.
Right. They don't lay eggs, and they fight with each other, and they cause a lot of problems. Sort of like someone else I know, you know. Um, so I would have the mom out there doing this, chicken sexing, putting him away, and then sort of explaining the issue with the father while she was doing it and snapping the necks of the little birds. This is anyway. You see what I mean? I want to
Yeah.
basically make it more interesting and a little bit. I don't like symbolism, but anyway,
Mm.
I create a metaphor that sort of underscores maybe some of the issues that the mom is addressing as she's
Mm.
talking to the son, right? And it also
Okay.
makes her character sort of go up here, right? So now, anyway, so that's the kind of thing I would think about, and this is again for everybody. We have a tendency to, and my God, I suffer from this massively of having characters talk because I love language and I love talk and blah blah blah. So I have characters that are just talking heads with each other, but the characters are not doing anything. We must try to remember. We'll talk with Rashman in a minute. It's so much harder, right, in drama because they have so much more limitations because they're on a stage. When we write stories, we don't have any limitations. So you can believe that, going back to this idea that the story is a base, exposition is weak anyway. You can believe that when we try and bring our story up to a publisher or someone like that, that there are other people, and I know some of them, who are basically using everything at their disposal to do the best possible work that they can do and make it as engaging as they can. And that includes having characters actually talk to each other or engage with each other while being in action and being in a location that's going to be interesting and new for the reader, right? So the difficult conversation between the mom and the son, that's something that everyone can understand. But none of us have seen this unique thing of the conversation taking place while the mother is snapping the necks of little baby chicks. Okay? So we want to have both, all the time, basically, to make our story rise up. But I'm going to be interested to see where you go with this, Jay. I I I was, I was like, I don't see where he's going with this. This looks like this is the end, and then I was like, well, I'm willing to be surprised, and that's exactly what you want, right? Because the nature of this story is that he's going to continue to pursue this,
Mhm.
love interest. This is the nature of the story. We've had, thousands of years of this story. And this is what happens. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen next. That's very good. But you might have given yourself too much of a problem. It's sort of like Bruce Willis in that building with the terrorists. There's a guy there that he just is not going to beat. And
Mm.
that's tough.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Otis.
Yep. I'm really going quick, Abanov. That is incredible. We've got this.
Yes, we are.
Let's Rashma.
That's right.
Let's talk
Hi.
about this piece.
Yeah. Right.
Um, okay. Let's I'm gonna have to move this. It's gonna go quick, so maybe we can start. If you see that red line, and then
Right.
I'll have to move it for you.
Yep. Jay, do you have a minute without waiting for her response? Thanks. Now listen to this and tell me what you make of it. The sesquipedalian, I don't know how to pronounce it, professor's lecture was a farrago of abstractions, fantasies, and deception. Silence, Jay. Does it make sense? Anjali, it's a bit vague, but maybe within the context, thanks, I'll keep it. Would you have changed it if I had understood it? I don't want my writing to be easy. Who reads complicated stuff? You have a different taste. What are you reading these days? My Love Story by Sameer Singh. He's an engineer who became a writer after his girlfriend died. You mean the kind who writes simple emotional stories in high school English, published by HarperCollins at 25? He can't be bad. Did he win a literary award? He sold 1 million copies. McDonald's sells 6.5 million burgers every day.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Very, very funny. So tell us a little bit about this this work.
Yeah,
And also, I'm wondering about the how much distance you're going to cover in it too.
In the world. Oh, well, it's a fall of the heroes, fall of Jay, I'm thinking. And it's, that when you take up art, there's something that you end up losing. And in this case, it is his relationship with his wife. And I don't know, should I just see Jay's fall through his relationship with Anjali, or should I see it through other relationships also, is what I'm wondering. And that's what that's where it is. I have still to make heaps of creative choices. And yeah.
Well, I guess I was wondering, are we going to follow these characters through? Are they going to continue to develop in a kind of longer work where they're sort of
This is the first scene. This is the first scene, exploratory scene of this play. Right.
Okay. So when I like this. This is funny. Jay is he's an elitist. I mean, it reminds me. I think I've told you the story of my mentor was saying to me. He was like, "So, what are you looking for in your writing?" Blah blah blah. And I talked for a while, and he said to me, "It sounds to me like you're someone who wants to have written." He said. So, like, to enjoy all the success, all the accolades, all the, like this, obviously this sentence here, it's almost, it verges on stereotype, but it's funny and it's also the beginning. So if we start him off as a kind of stereotype in this way, then we want to deepen him and humanize him as we go along. So, he wants people to, he's more interested in literary awards than actual readership. And to me, when people are like that, right, which I've met many, they are elitists. They sort of despise humanity. I think Anjali sort of puts it out there. If I had understood it, would you have changed it?
Right.
Right. And the answer there is probably yes, he would have.
Yeah.
And in that sense, he's an elitist who even despises Anjali, his wife.
Right.
Right. So that's quite a core issue that I think you would probably have to then pursue in regard to Jay. Right now, so Anjali is, in a way, she's sort of typical. She's sort of like, the clock is ticking. My biological clock is ticking. Are we going to have babies? So that's also like this. These two things are sort of being put together maybe a little bit one-dimensionally, and then they just continue, butting heads throughout the entire piece so far.
Right.
And we don't have a hint of how they're actually going to develop and actually humanize in a deeper way. It just becomes that sort of superficial thing. Well, she's just another woman with a biological clock, and he's just, a guy who's pursuing his art. And then there you have it. It just has this sort of, what do I say? Do you ever see that game, the Battle Bots? They're little like plastic things that hit each other like that, and then one gets his head knocked off. It's a little bit like they're Battle Bots, because of that one-dimensionality. And I think you'll have to probably work to explore these issues in a deeper way. And I think that they can be. Like I can, you know, at this point in my life, I can, well, let's say there was a point in my life where I first was pretentious like Jay. Right. You know, where I wanted to have, you know, I wanted to be the writer who has written. I wanted to be, you know, the person everyone's saying, well, gosh, you're so smart. You know, you were keeping it all hidden. Why did you keep it hidden so long that you're a genius? Right. I was that person. And then I was like, well, let's see, maybe I do want readership. Maybe people are not so bad after all. Maybe their esteem is good enough. And now maybe it's something different. So, you want to try and see into Jay's character to see like what's and what do I want to say, like what's okay about him, you know? I mean, of course he has these aspirations, of course he wants to be seen and he wants to be known, so that gets to a kind of deeper core that starts to penetrate below this sort of this surface depiction. And then I think Anjali, that would be true of Anjali too. So right now, the way it plays is, you know, Jay is kind of a jerk, you know, for these sort of foolish aspirations, these foolish elitist aspirations in which he doesn't work and he doesn't do anything. So he's kind of a fool. And Anjali is kind of, she's also just as superficially good, right? You know, that her biological clock and having a family, that somehow that gets a pass. You know, and that's just good, and he's just bad. So I think there's a little more work to be done to sort of find, you know, and to develop through this, create a situation through this that it becomes apparent how what they want is really, I don't know, a true and deep expression of themselves, you know, the one that
I don't know what they want together, and I think the idea was just to get those two conflicts on the page, you know, just two people on stage, and it's again my deepest influence here is George and Martha. We all know about that. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? So, you know, when you see that kind of dialogue and you've been inspired to write it somehow. So I think that's a driving force. And I like Mehmet's speech, so I kind of make people talk like that. That's what's happening. But I was thinking maybe they'll have a journey. So I don't know, should the journey be that Anjali has cancer and she's about to die, and then Jay has to finally write their love story, decides to write their love story, and what they were together and what it became because he took to art. And you know, our whole lofty ideas of what art is and what it actually is not. You know, that's why I'm kind of trying to take music, you know, like Western classical, and I'd have different themes and different paintings coming up with different scenes. So there's plenty to kind of, I still have to make those choices.
Right. I think it's, I mean, I see that, and I see that it's developing. These are little things to like try and, what I would do in order to think about deepening it towards the end, like as we're starting here, I would try and think about like, where and how are they also kind with each other to some degree? Like if you want to move it in that direction, like what is lovable about Jay? Okay. Right? This is something that I saw in the workshops, you know, you know, it was actually kind of common. Like, I don't know, Rashma, if you like identify more with the Jay character or the Anjali character. I have some sense, because I'm a writer, I know that we writers sort of tend to identify with our writer characters a little bit. But one of the things that I've noticed about us as writers is that when we present characters that are sort of like us, you know, or that we identify with, we kind of will do one of two things. We'll either lionize them or we'll denigrate them.
Right. Right.
You know, it's sort of like we make them more than what they are. I've seen that. I have funny stories about that.
Right.
I really did save everybody on the mountain. It's like,
Right.
Okay, good, thanks. Or I think quite commonly, and I did this a lot myself, was that I really took these characters and I put them through their paces and denigrated them. I didn't see I didn't want to pull out the humanity in the character that was sort of based on me too. I took a negative disposition towards them.
Right.
And one of the questions that we sometimes had in workshops was like, so like, let's say I wrote a story and I had this character, he's sort of really despicable in so many ways. But yet people are still interacting with him and still, you know, they care for him, they live with him or they love him or whatever. I'm like, why? The question would be, why? What does Anjali see in Jay? What on earth? You know? And Jay is like, at some point he says, you know, I only married you because of some false pregnancy. It's like, oh my God. So like, you're like, get out of here already, you know? So what is binding them together? So it could be something good, or it could be something good, or it could be, you know, if it's Mamet, right? It's kind of a codependency enabling thing, right? So she enables him and he somehow enables her. I think probably there's, you know, a kind of combination of those things. This is, so why don't you focus on writing? Painting is slowing you down, Anjali says. So Anjali comes in and she is a little bit of, you know, kind of also the nag, right?
Yes.
And she's pedestrian in her mind. So again, these are like,
Okay.
She's not, you know, where does she rise? But let's say, you think writing a novel is easier than making a film? I just think 5 years is a long time to write a novel. It's not one novel, it's somebody's fucking soul on the paper. Anjali starts to go to the bedroom. Okay, so this is a little bit ambiguous. This might be a place to deepen it. It's my soul, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if he's aspiring to write his soul onto the paper, that is at least,
okay. Yes.
you know, it's just ambiguous because it's like, is it someone's made up soul? He's making up the soul, or is he really trying to get something that's true about himself?
Right.
So that might be a place that, and then it goes, you know, shit, it's gone. Why do you talk when I'm working? I don't need your permission to talk in my house. Okay, so they're at each other right here. If I can't hear you, then you bloody well need my permission. If I can, so at this point, it's gotten so bad that like for me, you know, I'm feeling a little bit hopeless. And you know what? I do not always choose to read, you know, or listen or watch Mamet. Okay.
Right.
I mean, sometimes I'm just like, get me out of here. Why? This is too much, you know?
Right.
So, you know, once they start like kind of swearing at each other, it becomes so tense and there's no place to go that I also start to flee, basically, emotionally. I'm going away because I don't see what's good. And so you don't get to decide the rules unless you start paying for the rent. She comes back. I get to decide because I do your share of the cleaning. You want a servant, you know, it's like, oh my God. It's like, I mean, it's already been so bad. And now they just continue. And I'm like, I'm a person who flees trouble, you know, like emotionally.
Right.
There's different people. Some people, you know, run to it and they want the fight, but I'm not that person. I actually flee. So.
But on stage, you know, Otis, people come to watch drama because it's dramatic. You know, we have to make it more dramatic than real life.
I know, but it also needs to be modulated. It would be the main argument that I would make. You know, so like there has to be something. They may talk to each other like this, but we have to know that it's okay. You have to give us those sort of signals. You know, it's like if I can hear you, then you bloody well need my permission. He's like, oh, and by the way, I made some coffee for you. You know,
Right.
you know,
Okay.
like something that's sort of like, you know what, you bloody well need my permission. Oh, I made some coffee for you too and some scones if you want to try them. They're in the kitchen. And then she comes out, she's like, these are good. I could use a little salt. You're always saying I need salt. You know, like now
Yeah.
it's sort of modulated.
Right.
You know, your other
Relieve
play.
tension. Okay. Right.
Right, something to relieve the tension. So it's just not again these battle bots, and I'm like, okay, all I'm watching is them punching each other basically in the face. I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch that in the movies. I don't want to watch that anywhere, verbally or whatever. So, and when you modulate it, then you also sort of show the other side. It's like, okay, so you do need my permission if I can hear you. It's like, man, that's pretty that's pretty tyrannical. But if he's made some scones or something, then I'm like, wait a second, but he's also engaged in gestures that are kind and generous and maybe even loving, you know?
Yeah. And why they're together, that's the question I have to answer, I think, and that'll kind of see why they're together and right.
Right.
And
And so and it basically creates a text and a subtext, right?
right.
So where what they're saying, it might be on this level, but
Right.
what they do with each other is on another level. So like when he's like, for example, one of the harshest moments is, you know, when he says, there's a fake pregnancy and whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, to understand is like characters say things and they may even understand things in a certain way, and they think that their understanding of things is what it is, but it's just language,
Right.
right? It's just what they're saying and what they're saying to themselves and what they're reinforcing for themselves. And in my belief system, what we do is we actually basically we sort of constantly regurgitate a narrative upon ourselves
Right.
that basically habituates us to a way of thinking. But even as we're doing that, our actions, I never know how to use belie, but anyway, our actions belie our words, if that's right. Like our actions undermine our words, and that's a subtext. If you can hear me, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I made some scones that are in the kitchen. I hope you like
Right.
them.
Right.
Right. So now because this is, we get the conflict of like, what they are together.
Right.
So there must be something there. But if the only thing we're getting into dialogue is that they basically completely despise each other and know each other not at all and have absolutely no sympathy for the other person's point of view.
Mhm.
I'm sort of like, that's more like Sartre's No Exit,
Right.
which
Okay.
is, oh, so, so, and this was just an example. So, here Jay comes in, he says, love is a personal problem. It's like, come on, dude.
He has those socialist
you know,
ideas. I have socialist friends who say, "Oh, love stories are personal stories. Those stories we'll never read." So that's what I'm kind of basing him upon. All those,
Sure.
notions, that big notion. And of course, I'm laughing at myself and people like me. So it's kind of, I think, because we don't want to love ourselves enough. That is why those characters start looking like what they're looking like.
Right. And I even agree. Like when I read this, I understand what he's saying, but it's presented so unsympathetically that I'm
Okay.
not able to really access anything that might be true about it. It's not that love is a personal problem, but love is personal. Love
Right.
is something small in a sense between two people, right? So you could say that as opposed to things like the economy and Marx and capitalism, the things that shape our very existence. Well, then Anjali might say, you think love is small, but yet love is something that's shared by everyone on earth. So
Yeah.
maybe it's not as small as you think.
Mm.
Right. So now they at least are making arguments, they're talking in a way that I can start to hear them a little bit, as
Right.
opposed to it being, so negative. This is something I learned when, like when I was young, and even now, I might even still employ it. Like I would go to a museum with friends, right? I grew up in New York, and go to great museums. You go to a museum of modern art, and we'd look at a painting, and someone would say, "What do you think of that?" And I would just go, "Oh, I hate it." That was the end of the conversation. I did that in order to hide the fact that I have nothing to say and I don't know how to approach talking about this work of art. So I was able to hide myself by basically being very negative. I throw that out there as a strategy that wasn't that successful in terms of me developing, relationships at that time in my life. Yeah,
Mhm.
Abhinav?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Um, I think there's definitely some place to go with these two if we can start understanding their common ground, and understanding that if the audience can start understanding that, wait a second, they do have common ground, but they are not able to see it. So that's then that becomes the either tragic or happy circumstance. Are they going to be able to see their common ground or not?
Right.
That becomes a direction, you know.
Right.
Great. I a lot of a lot of great dialogue. um, um, this too, how casual you are with words, timeless. That's good. And then her thing. So like this is just a little example of where, like if you're not ready to be a father at 45, you'll never be. I mean,
Right.
it's just
Stating the
cliche, right?
fact. Right.
It's just cliche. But can we talk like normal people? That's
Yeah.
so much, that's up here. Can we talk like normal people?
Mm. Right.
Right? Why can't we? That is a great question.
Right.
And his stance too, you're so casual with words.
Right.
You're so casual with words. And she says, "Can we talk like normal people?" That's awesome. I love it.
Right.
But not embedded with so much, diametric and in a way superficial diametric opposition. I mean, it's just the diametric opposition. It's not the other truth that's also very much apparent, which is, you know what? If they're so diametrically opposed, they wouldn't be on stage together.
Right. Right. Can I kind of sum it up and say that, well, when the audience is looking there and say, well, we fight like that too, but then this is unbelievable because we don't fight that much. So, or we fight.
Well, it isn't. It isn't that. It's that the. So I think when you're viewing the stage, right? When Zandi and I fight, we're still in the room together. There's a truth in that, right? There's the words are not the only thing that are there, right? There's other things there. Whereas when we're looking at this on the page right now, in terms of the words, we're not seeing the other part that's there. We're not seeing that they are on stage as human beings together. That they're and like all human beings, and this is, I think, very much true. All human beings, they have two impulses, both to do what they want and also the desire to be safe in a sense, which is caused by being with other people. It's not safe to be completely alone, So, Jay needs Anjali and Anjali needs Jay. So, but we don't see that. Anyway, so I would just try and deepen that, and I think it will go someplace a little bit. It will go to it'll start speaking to issues that are a little bit more profound and will resonate with the audience, as opposed to them simply witnessing something that's basically an impossible situation. You don't want the reader just to witness. You want them to have resonance with themselves and then see where they're going. If this looks hopeless, right now this looks hopeless, what is the reader involved in, except for basically something that's protracted and hopeless.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Hope springs eternal. True words.
Right.
Okay, we better move on.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Let's see. Let's look at. Let's see. I did that. Sorry, I don't. Oh, that's Jay's. Madhavi. Does Sri Charan come?
Hi, Otis. I'm here.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you? How's it going?
So Sri Charan, he's going to get even shorter time because he really was Johnny on the spot and submitted 2 pieces, which is awesome. Okay, so I appreciate that. It becomes more, but I like that. Obviously, go getting it kind of thing. Here, let's have you just read a short this part in the beginning, and then we'll look at this, and we'll look at the next section too.
Yeah, sure. Okay. The court was largely empty, save a few courtiers who I deemed too prominent enough to attend the messenger's purpose. There was the chief advisor of Madra, old of age but wise of mind, the generals of the chariots, cavalry, elephantry, and infantry, my son Rukmanada, brave and proud, a man almost my age, covered awkwardly in soft lamb wool shawls. He was the messenger sent by the Pandavas, and from what I was told, he was a brother to Virata, the king of Matsya. The messenger I brought sat beside me, and they exchanged cold smiles. Pujavati descended the throne as I reached for the steps of the dais. Do not doze off, she whispered in my ear before she went to sit in the queen's seat.
Okay, great. So, Sri Charan, for all of us, you're doing so. The time period here is so. This is before the war. So we're talking. What's an approximate date for it?
Approximate date as in
Like 4,000 years ago.
yeah, there were some there is not exact date, I guess. There are some contradictions and all, but I guess it was something like 3,000 years ago.
Yeah. So I think you're just doing such a great job bringing this world to life. A little, maybe you lean a little bit on things that maybe are easier to do than harder to do, sort of archaeological evidence, so much like in archaeology, right? So much of what existed is lost because it just deteriorates. I mean, I love the sort of story, like, people are always talking about the flints and the weapons and the Clovis points. In the US, we have Clovis points and things like that, because they talk about those things because they last. And we tend to have an emphasis about our ancient cultures as aggressive because these weapons last, the fortifications last, all of those things last, but like the textiles don't, and the baskets don't, and the, et cetera, et cetera. But you do a nice job here. The court was largely empty, save for a few courtiers whom I deemed to be prominent enough to attend the messenger's purpose. I like that you're really involved in sort of the idea of this court and how the king might decide who stays and who doesn't stay, that they would be prominent. I think that that's a great understanding. You have some knowledge of these ancient societies, or you're doing your research. I don't know which.
Yeah, not understanding. As in some books where I read and they use these ideas of having only a few courtiers around like that. For example, a Song of Ice and Fire where the king has a small council, right? Like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it could be really cool if you could even delve in a little bit more. I just say name a few, and with a detail. For example, so and so who was from here, and so that we can get a kind of sense of this larger world. Because for me, it's even hard for me to understand courtiers, in a sense. So yeah. It's already rising up quite a level. Then we have the chief advisor of Madra, old and wise. The generals of the chariots, the cavalry, elephantry, and infantry. My son, Um, Brave and Proud. So we want to be careful about cliches, because the problem with cliches is they don't actually impress the reader with anything. Like
Yeah.
when I read Brave and Proud, I actually don't think anything at all. So it doesn't become a descriptor.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's like, if I said, I have two daughters, they're great. I mean, what do you know about my daughters? Nothing at all. You know that I think that they're great, I guess. So you want to go a little bit deeper. A man almost my age covered awkwardly in soft lamb's wool shawls. I like that very much. That's great. He was the messenger sent by the Pandavas. There's issues here with the messengers and how things are forming that I'm having a little difficulty understanding, but I think you're doing a great job generally sort of presenting this world. And this is something that I've taken as a lesson for a long period of time. Do not ever use any words that suggest boredom or anything like that in your work ever. And that's just a rule that you follow, because human beings are very impressionable.
Okay.
So, like,
Okay. So maybe the reader thinks your stories also.
Yeah. So I just never ever say anything like that. Let the reader decide for themselves whether they're going to doze off or not. But I do not want to give them the idea of boredom. I think I've even written it probably, but I know that I've seen it written. It's like, blah, blah, blah. He kept talking on. It was so boring. Don't say that. Don't use that word. It's just a personal rule. So be careful. Here you have the boredom of the overused templates. Okay, we've just read through the whole thing, and now you've told me it was boring. So I didn't find it boring, because if I had, I would have stopped reading. Okay. So don't spin me on it. You have. Let me go to the other one too.
Shall you open house 2? October 27th one.
Right. This. Oh, no. It's not this one.
October 27th.
Right. Okay. So in both of these sections, my main comment is this one. We want to keep what the protagonist wants and doesn't want, right? Because those are mirrors of each other. What they want and what they don't want are mirrors on the page at all times. And in both of these sections, we kind of lose track of that. So we lose track of it, for one, with the talk about the boredom, right? And we continue to sort of lose track of it with in this section where the messengers are talking. Even though what the messengers say is really interesting, I've lost track of what the protagonist wants. This is the main thing. The main thing that we want is, what does the protagonist want? We want to keep that at the front all the time. It's basically dictating their actions, and we understand that, and we see the subtext of that all the time, and we understand it. And we basically have the experience of, we wonder, are they going to get what they want or not? And we see the continuous demonstration that they're not going to get what they want, basically. That they're not able to control the experience through their actions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We need that totally focused in our minds at all times. We can't go into like, okay, I understood. When we talked about this story and in your original renditions, right, you're sort of losing yourself in all the details, but you're forgetting about that drive. That drive is tremendously important. That drive is the spine of the story. What the protagonist wants, we always want it to be there. And then all the details, we dress around it. Okay, so that's all the body, but we want that drive to be there, because that's the thing that drives the reader on. That's the main thing for both of these pieces. So I think you're doing a fabulous job involving us in those details. And maybe this is part of the evolution of every writer, is that once we start to get involved in those details, we just love them. I mean, we can get lost in them, and we do the research and we use the words, and they're so amazing. And then we think that that's the only purpose that we have. And it's not. The emotional purpose is the protagonist trying to get what they want and not getting it. no, 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 and having it be as tangible as they can possibly make it. So that's sort of how we were talking about the piece, before. Like, for example, like the way I was making it up is like he does not want to hear the message, right? But here we're just falling into it. It's just the course of events, and I have no idea what the king wants or doesn't want really throughout all this.
Yeah, okay. So I changed it a little bit. So instead of being neutral, he had fixated on supporting his nephews here. But because the others did not agree, he just goes with it.
So,
But again, because of the dream and all, he participates again.
so you're saying, so he wants to support the Pandavas?
Yeah,
Okay. So when this messenger comes and basically, how do you say the Kauravas?
yeah, Kauravas.
So when the messenger comes and basically tries to say, we want you to support the Kauravas, and this is what they're saying, et cetera, he's basically, set against that. And then,
Yeah.
and then the other kings, are going to come along and they're going to discuss, and then they're finally
Yeah, and they want to
agree.
remain neutral there.
They want to remain neutral. Okay. I'll probably have to do a little thinking, about that to see if that's sort of driving in a way. I was very clear about the idea that he does not want to be involved in the war.
Mhm.
That was clear to me. So in the earlier drafts, and I felt
Yeah.
like that was a good drive that you can work with, because he's trying to avoid it, and finally he's not going to. I'd have to think about how this works, because what you basically want to do is you want to think about the large reversal. Whatever they want is basically not what they get,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's the big reversal of our story, is like whatever they wanted in the beginning is not what they get, at the end. So okay, well we'll continue to think about that. But anyway, I think you're on a great path here, and it's really enjoyable. These characters are very much coming to life, and you're making nice, clear decisions about how you want to represent their characters. I like this messenger who comes. We've lost some things about his sort of pompous dress. I miss that, but I like that he threatens them, and he turns from like, oh, you could do this, et cetera, and then when it doesn't seem to be going that way, he starts to threaten them. I think that's interesting. But again, we want that drive of the protagonist. That is key.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying not to lose the focus on what he wants in this story, right?
Don't
like what is
lose
the drive?
focus. Don't lose the focus of what he wants, and have it always be clear. And if you need to, you can start every section with the king thinking or imagining or telling somebody, exactly what he wants, just to make it clear for yourself. And then really in each section, whatever the protagonist wants, they don't get over and over again. So it basically goes like that until they make some kind of, decision at the end that propels them into the resolution of the story.
Yeah, okay.
This is, it's the essential drive of story. The character wants something and they don't get it. I mean, this is like the fundamental message of my I lost my wallet story. I lost my wallet. I called up the restaurant. They had it. I went down and I picked it up. That is not a story. Okay. I lost my wallet. The restaurant said they had it. When I showed up, they said, we don't have it anymore. I was like, why not? It's like, well, because you walked in just 5 minutes ago and took it. I was like, I walked in 5 minutes ago and took it. Someone was exactly like me. And they're like, yes, you did. You walked in 5 minutes ago and took your wallet. He just went that way. Right? That's a story.
Oh. Okay, is it a fantasy or?
Mine? My story?
Yeah.
I just made it up. I was just telling it to you right here.
Okay.
I don't know what it is.
Oh, okay.
It's the principle.
Okay.
It's the principle of the story. All right. Thank you. Let's carry on.
Yeah, thank you.
Vandana, are you? I see that you're here. We had some trouble with the internet connection last time, so let's see if we have a better shot at it this time. Vandana.
Yeah, I've asked her to unmute herself. I'm not. Vandana, if you are there, could you please unmute and share your webcam? Okay, perhaps we can move to the next one, Otis, and then come back to her piece towards the end.
Okay. Let's look at your work. Let's see if we'll find it.
Okay.
Okay, let's have you read a little bit. Maybe from here. I want you to read quite a bit of this, but anyway, maybe we'll just go to. Let's just go to here. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. There's nothing here, and you've woken me up in the middle of the night for nothing, I said, looking down at her. She didn't look up at me, but continued looking straight ahead, her eyes locked on something or someone at the far end of the room, a good 30 feet away. I followed her gaze, and that's when my heart skipped a beat, and then some, and then one more. There, in front of my eyes, at the far end of the living room, close to the wall, below the giant photo of the Brihadishvara temple in Tanjore I'd got framed, stretching across the width of the room, was the unmistakable shape, color, and now the smell wafting to my nostrils, a freshly molted snakeskin. I am a man not given to scaring easily. I find jump scares in movies off-putting. The dark holds no fear for me, and I do not find reptiles repellent, but I felt my skin go cold at the sight of that 20 feet long mold.
Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about what's happening with this story.
So in the first part that I had sent, it began with this person who adopts a stray dog from the shelter, and after a lot of getting used to adjusted and period of adjustment, he finally decides to keep her. And then one night he is woken up by the sound of his dog, a female dog, growling. And he switches a light on to see what the source may be. He suspects it's a burglar, but then when he switches on the light, goes into the living room and switches on the light there, he sees this long, freshly molted snakeskin lying there.
Okay.
And so that's where, this part ends. I have something in my mind for the third installment. I'm not sure at this point where the story is going, frankly. I have not plotted this out. I don't even know what kind of a genre it's going to take. Pure horror or some sort of a fantasy, or I have no idea. What I do know is this is not a romance.
Okay, so there's no like with the,
nope.
Yeah, okay.
Nope. All
right. I feel pretty involved. This snake comes in, and so that's my big question. But it sort of pushes me back to the beginning a little bit, anyway, which is that I want to, we talked like last week about sort of the universal and the unique, and that both of these things are sort of, exceptionally important for our story to work, basically. Ezra Pound said, make it new. Make it new. And that basically means to me that it is make the story new. So that it doesn't change, in a sense, the story of life, the story of human beings struggling against adversity, either triumphing or in triumph or failure. That doesn't really change, but we do want to add this element of newness. So that plays some role here in that, the I, this I character is one of the places where we want him to be unique, but also he's definitely universal. He's going through his life just like I do. So I kind of, we want to be careful with that. We want to make sure that we individuate him in a way. I might worry also, there's this place that they're in. So like, I do want to know about the place. Is this a place where there can be 20-foot molted snake skins or not? I mean, it's quite significant. If it's a place where they could have such a thing, if he's, on the outskirts of a jungle where, I've heard,
right.
Like this is, you've seen this done many times, I put down a paper, I took the bus, I had my dog and I took the bus and, I read about another child eaten by a boa constrictor, okay, put that away and and now there's a molt in my house. Okay, so that means that it's really happening in a sense, right? Or it's something that's completely unusual or magical or something like that, and I would have to know that too.
Right.
The reader actually has to be located in a world that they can understand. It doesn't have to be a real world. If it's a magical world, it has to be a magical world that works by rules that they understand, basically.
Got it.
I think,
correct.
Right. So like one of the greatest examples of this kind of work right now is Murakami. If you've read any, I forget his first name, but Murakami is just a genius at sort of creating these bizarre worlds in which things are occurring. And I don't know if that's this or whether this is realism or not. So I mean, for me, I would just like you to enhance that. Like, if this is, for me, India, if this is taking place in India, India is incredibly unique to my experience, and I think that those details really need to be there. And it is one of the, Abhinav, I was thinking with this work, it's one of these things with writers is that what's in front of us doesn't get our attention that much, right? Because you live in a place, you're not noticing all the details, and if I'm writing about my place, I'm not necessarily depicting all the details. I depict my life as being sort of generic because it's generic in my experience. And you might be depicting your life as generic because it's generic in your experience. But when we see the translation between the two, I am very much, no matter what, hungering for that unique world that you can provide, but you have to notice it first. Like, in a sense, we have to, as writers, we have to be in our own world like we're aliens. Seeing it for the first time, seeing the strange customs of the people, seeing the bizarre structures, seeing the norms and all of that stuff. We have to see it all with fresh eyes so that we can write it for the reader so that they can appreciate that world. So right. That might be something a little bit to think about. And I really want to put that out generally to all the writers here, is that you may, I'm saying make it new, and I'm suggesting that you might undervalue the uniqueness of the world in which you already live in, that I believe that readers are really clamoring to want to be a part of. So I really want you to include that. Anyway, The other thing I can worry about in this piece is that I am worried about characters who exist alone. That's not very true to people's experience in reality. That they, even if they do live alone, they have interactions with other people all the time. And I take, I have little stories that, but I was teaching this graduate workshop, and this woman wrote this story about someone who was completely alone all the time, and she, seemed dangerously depressed. And what she did was she attempted suicide by buying fish and putting it in her swimsuit and then swimming out to be eaten by sharks. And I'm like, no, God, no. I will tell you, I was like, I called it the shrimp in a short story, right? So it's a shrimp in a short story. It's like, no one would do that. And someone who would do that cannot get on a bus, right? They cannot go to a store and buy fish. They cannot do any of these things. And then that person who can't buy fish and cannot get on a bus and cannot do these things and cannot buy a swimsuit, she can't do any of those things. That person does not exist. That person doesn't exist. Real people, no matter how bizarrely they might envision the world, interact with other people all the time. And even if they don't have a relationship with other people, they're fairly isolated, they're still interacting with other people because human beings do. Absolutely.
Right. The reason why more people have not been added is because, as I said, I'm not sure what direction the story is taking. There are going to be people there, but I'm just not sure who and how, or when, more correctly, when to add them. But yes, definitely this character is not going to be having this adventure or whatever he ends up having with just him and his dog.
Yeah. Okay.
And a snake skin.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But so it's just, I know that, like, I feel like I have done it too. I mean, when I've written, I'll just have an isolated person, right? And in a sense, it's just easier, but that isolated person is kind of generic. It's an idea of the lonely guy and his dog, and it's not. Once we start developing those relationships, we actually start seeing the uniqueness of the person, and that's part of that new, that uniqueness that we want to present on the page. They have mothers, they have fathers, they have relationships with other people. They talk to the person on the corner every day, or they don't, right? All of those things start to tell us about that character. And it means when we start thinking about them in relationship to other people, that they actually become so much more complex. They don't just exist as this fairly easy vehicle, this I that has absolutely no personality and no connections to things. I mean, that's
right.
So that's it's a little bit like if this were a movie script, right? All of that character development work would have been done ahead of time before starting, and then what would happen is it would start to unfold, the beginning of it would be, like Jay's piece, where there's a letter and there's a wedding or something like that. It's like, oh, there's a call, he's coming back with the dog, and he says, then he gets a call and he's like, oh, hi, Mom. Oh, yes, I will be there for Sunday dinner. Yes, that's going to be great. Yes, I remember. Absolutely no animals. Don't bring any animals. I remember. Of course, I never would do that. Thank you. Bye. Bye, Mom. Love you. Clicks, right? So we'd see that coming. But I think in this piece, I'm totally in. You say you don't know where it's going, and I also don't know, but you do achieve that thing that I'm definitely there, right? I mean, that's that level of experience. Even though I think that you finally want to make this character more accessible and broader for me, so that I have a greater interest rather than having, again, what I might consider a stereotype. Right now, just a nondescript, lonely guy. That
Correct. I mean,
exist, but I'm
this character, as of now, exists more as a shell than a complete, flesh and bone, flesh and blood human being. I had a couple of questions about this. One is, I think, at the where you have circled apprehensive and trepidation and connected the two.
Oh, yeah. Let's see where that is. Where is it? Oh, there it is.
There. Right.
Oh, I was just... So he said, he says, I got out of bed and tiptoed towards the door barefoot. I wasn't afraid, no, but apprehensive. I mean, I like this sort of this sense of, distinction between the two, but because you're setting up something sort of delicate there, I would have maybe just sort of reiterated that, because now I'm sort of like, okay, is there a difference between he was apprehensive before, but now he's trepidatious? And I'm like, is there a difference between there was a difference between fear and apprehension. Is there a difference between apprehension and trepidation?
Okay.
I
got it.
I don't know. So it's like with some apprehension, as I said before, like this character is a little bit arch, he's a little bit like language oriented, and he definitely will he'll leave his scene in order to enhance the language. So it didn't strike me to uproot the tap from my bathroom sink either. I didn't fancy myself a sunny deal. With some apprehension, as I said before, I opened the door.
Got it.
So it's like it's this elevated language, which is part of the character, and we see that again too. Like this is where I wanted it to feel have more of that sort of Indian sense to it. I had to be, what's the phrase the English use? Like that sort of sense of some kind of partition there. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. What were they even talking about? Was I some kind of rabbit? No, I was like, but
got it.
Be careful. Like use it. You love language. I love language. I have to be careful. And it wouldn't be the first time that the writer is writing about language rather than the story that they're putting on the page. Anyway,
got it.
I'm in. I feel like you're handling point of view well. You're depicting this, the dog and being in this place, and I actually think that view of seeing this snake is quite well done. And that molten skin, he's like looking at the dog's looking here. I like that there's this big poster. I'm not sure that I even understand it. It seems to have a kind of magical quality to it, the way it's depicted, but I thought it was really interesting. I do not understand why he doesn't turn on the lights. I don't understand why he gets back into bed. There's a couple of things that,
So I have to thank you for a lot of these things that you pointed out, Otis. Like point of view before submitting, while writing it, I had this image of Otis, hovering over my head. Point of view, Abhinav, if you screw it up, you'll never hear the end of it. Number one. The second one was detail. You say, you have to place the reader. You have to, you cannot place the reader in some sort of an abstract world. It has to be real. So. Part of the writing was trying to make sure I was, not falling into the trap of just writing bland, nondescript locations and scenes. But I think the other things you've mentioned are very fair and valid points. Some of them I know deliberately they are by choice simply because I don't know where the story is going. But some of the other points, definitely yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is reaching that level where I feel like I'm going along and I'm with this person. Now, the issue is like I say, so we have the story, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen with the story, and that's fine. But I'm definitely wondering what's going to happen next. So that impetus has been set.
Thank you.
I'm having the experience that I want to have with the story in that I'm with this person. And so I feel like I'm walking a mile in his shoes and I'm undergoing this experience. So that's achieving the other main thing that I want to do, which is leave my world behind and be in your world. That's what I want. I mean, that's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that as soon as I open a book. It's just like, you know, it's like someone goes to a tarot reader, superstitiously, like, you know a lot about them right away. As soon as they walk in, they don't know what the future is, and they're scared and wondering what it is, right? You know a lot about them. You know a lot about me when I open up your book. Every reader is the same. I want to leave my world behind. I'm telling you that. And I want to go into your world. So if you don't provide a world for me, then the compact has not been fulfilled, and I'm going to look somewhere else. So you do that. And then now it's a question of, you've put me into the consciousness of this person. Is it interesting enough for me? Is it new enough for me? Like, I was in New York, and I was a pretty lonely guy in New York. I guess I interacted with people on some level, wait a second, I did get a dog, in fact. So it's not make it new. I don't want to relive that experience. Remember, I want to leave my world and my experiences and have new experiences, right? With new people, not me. Me, I've had plenty of. That's great. I'm very intrigued to find out what's going to happen.
Thank you, Otis.
But I do very much want him to get involved with other people. I will say this as a blanket statement. Human beings, Rashma's argument about love and all that, we're really interested in other people, and we're interested in relationships, because other people are really important to us. Our survival depends on all of them, and our relationships with them, and our happiness depends on them, and our sadness, and all of these things. So getting human beings involved with other human beings is really an essential part of our work, and delving into those relationships, which are complex. But yeah, wonderful, Abhinav.
Thank you, Otis.
Let's see if we have Vandana. Are you able to? Hi, how are you?
Vandana, you are muted. If you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, Otis, for being late.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Thank you for submitting this work.
But this work isn't completed. I don't know how is it submitted halfway. I have submitted you the full again.
Okay. Well, I wasn't able to look at the full piece then. I was only able to look at this.
Yes,
so
yes.
This will be all I'll be able to comment on. So let's have you. No differentiation.
Do you want me to read the other portion?
No, because I'm gonna have to focus and comment on this portion that I have, and let's see. Sorry, can I have you read? We have for time. Oh, sorry. Not here from here. Last year had been hard for the city, and read to this section here. These two paragraphs.
Sure.
Thank you.
Last year had been hard for the city. She was aware of it. There could be no differentiation as to the sorrows. The young, old, rich, poor, saints, or the demons, all lay shattered. She wanted to extend the helping hand, but she could not. The wails of sorrows and destruction were abundant. Oh, how she wanted to be with them, help them in their hour. She could not. The little girl cried all through the day. Her parents in hospital. The neighbors scared, lest they would be infected. The NGOs took her in the shelter. The teenage boy next door. His mother had passed some months ago. The boy stayed with his father and grandparents. His father was infected by the virus. His condition was not serious, but being a comorbid, he succumbed. Now he is alone to take care of his grandparents. Should I read the other part even?
Sorry, I turned off my mic. No, let's just try and concentrate on this. We have another piece after this too, so we're getting sort of short on time. And so I did see this morning that you sent me the full piece, but I didn't have time to read it as I was waking up and making my coffee. But the one principle that we can sort of take away, and everyone here will, sort of, lament along with you that the pieces are very short. But one of the ways I think about our writing is that we actually don't need to look at a lot to see where we might work on our writing to create a kind of deeper reader experience. We can look anywhere for that. So in this piece, and in a rewrite, so I really look forward to seeing you rewrite this piece with maybe some of these ideas in mind, is that we begin with it being very abstract, basically. So there are two essential ways that we use language. One is we have concrete language and we have abstract language. Abstract language are about ideas. They're intangible. So like love is an abstract idea. Hate is an abstract idea. Hope is an abstract idea. And then we have concrete things. Abanov's piece comes to mind. So I might be saying that he might want to sort of tweak and make more unique the concrete world that he's developed, but he has developed a concrete world. He has a character named I, a human being who's walking around. He has a dog. They have an apartment. They are in bed, right? They walk into the living room. They see a poster. They see a snake, right? A snake skin. So all of those things are concrete and tangible. When we use concrete, tangible language like that, in my mind, I see something, basically. Right? So I'm having an experience in my mind, an imaginative experience in my mind, and that is what I want. So I go back to, so the basic premise for me of the writer-reader relationship is, I as the reader, I want to leave my world behind. My world is tangible, right? I have this keyboard, right? I have, this Leatherman on my desk for some reason. God knows why. I have this cup. All of these things are tangible, concrete things. But I want to leave that world behind and I want to go into another world. I want that other world also to be concrete. Right? I don't want it to be a world that I can't see, that I can't get into that world unless it's a concrete world. So we need to use language that's concrete in order to do that. When I was in grad school, we went to some areas in the state where the education, there wasn't much education. I don't know why, the United States, why we do that. But anyway, we would go and we would teach poetry. And I taught poetry in some schools that were so run down, I couldn't believe it. There was a school where the kids didn't even have paper. They did not have paper. They did not have pencils. Anyway. But my friend, this poet, said, what concrete language is, they're language that you can pour gravy over. Does that make sense? Like, whatever it is, you can pour gravy over Abanov's eye. You can pour gravy over, the dog. You can pour gravy over a chair, over a keyboard, all of those things. So that's one way for us to understand the kind of language we want to gravitate towards. So when I read the beginning here, she came, she saw, she went. Nothing is happening. It's a little, we pick on Abanov a little bit more. He just has an eye. I can't see that character. I don't know what he looks like. I, or even if maybe it's a she for that matter. I don't know who the I is. I want to be able to see them. We have to do that work. I don't know what the location is. What's the setting? What does it look like? Are there bookshelves? Is there a microscope up top? Is Ganesha, dancing in the background? What is around? What is this location? When I leave my world, that's a location, and I want to go into this world that's also located. What is the time? Time. So she waited eagerly for months, so I have some sense that there is time in this world. But what time is it? Is it historical? Is this, is it modern times? What are the clues that will tell us? And then I will just point out that this is abstract. She's the harbinger of happiness is abstract. Tomorrow will be brighter than today. Her presence is magical and divine. I appreciate, it's very difficult to write about, if you're writing about this goddess, it's very difficult to write about a goddess with tangible, concrete language. I don't know how to answer that for you, answer that difficulty, but I am saying that the reader needs concrete language in order to have an imaginative experience of the world, and that the imaginative experience of the world is necessary to get the reader. Does that make sense? It's like a cyclical, the reader wants to leave their world, and then they come to your world, and we need to put a concrete world there, or else they will not stay with you. And so we have to find a way to sort of work with what we want to write about, the goddess, for example, and what we need to do to keep our reader. Because if we just do what we want to do without taking the reader into mind, then we don't have a reader, and then there's no purpose to us doing the writing. Right? So this is something we want to think about. I'm thinking, I don't know if Woody Allen is probably, I'm thinking of Mighty Aphrodite. So anyway, in Mighty Aphrodite, Woody Allen writes a story with Greek gods in it. And what he does is he has Aphrodite, the goddess, arrive in New York City. So it's a tangible person played by an actor. And she's in New York City with the cars and trucks and everything going around. And I can see that, obviously. I go to the movies, I see everything unfolding, I'm completely involved. We have to make these difficult decisions about what we're doing because of this pesky issue of having readers that understand the world in concrete terms. And then just here, this goes back to this idea of we want to present a universal story, which is about a character trying to get something and failing, which is a story that all of us on Earth, everybody knows about. It is the story of life. We try and we fail, as my father used to say. Try and fail, try and fail, try and fail. That struggle in life is something we all know and we all respond to. Characters wanting something. But then, so that's universal. And the other aspect is we want it to also to be a unique world. So when we get to things like the girl, what does she look like? Where is she? What's her name? If she cried throughout the day, where is she crying? In her room, at the park? Are there pigeons walking around? What are the unique details of this world? Her parents were admitted to the hospital. What were their names? What did they look like? Were they admitted together? This story is obviously a tragic story, and we know, we know over the past year and a half, we have these tragic stories, terrible tragic stories. And what we do as writers is we want to help our reader feel those stories, right? So that they're not abstract. And so to do that, we have characters and we humanize them. And we humanize them partially with their uniqueness, so that they're undergoing, human struggle, the struggle against mortality and death, that we're all going to eventually lose. But we also want them to be absolutely unique and humanized and individuated. We don't want them to be generic. We don't want a generic little girl, generic parents, generic grandfather, because I don't respond to generic, and it doesn't engage me. Maybe because we all distance ourselves from tragedy and difficulty and mortality, right? And sort of like Abanov's character, continue to pick on Abanov because what the heck. But his eye, like I said, that eye is too close to me. I want to read about this eye's struggle, but also have it not be me. I have my own struggles in my own world. So I don't want to read about my struggles in this made-up world. I'm trying to escape my world. I want to go into this world and read about a unique person undergoing my similar struggles so that I can participate in those struggles safely. And that, I think, is the reason why we need those characters, our protagonists and these other characters, and even the location, to be absolutely unique. It has to be different than mine. And we only achieve that by writing the details of those characters so that I can actually truly empathize with the experience, but feel safe doing so. Right? So,
exactly. Yes, Otis.
Yeah. So I think that's the challenge. That's the challenge here. And I think that I'm really looking forward to seeing how this story comes together. I don't know right now how this goddess who is, sort of a little bit above so far depicted is going to play a role in terms of what happens in terms of the tragedy of COVID is what I think we're talking about here, right? So I don't know how these two are going to come together, and I'm interested in knowing. In the meantime, so there's something developing here between those two forces, but we have to make sure that the reader experience, what I was saying about the story, everyone has to write a story. We're not going to get anywhere with our work unless we have a story. But then we want to make sure that the reader experience is the kind of experience the reader wants, that's going to be moving to them. And that's the level that we're going to get to with basically the words that we put on the page, making sure that they're concrete, making sure that they're evocative, detailed, so that a little movie goes off in my mind. And when the movie goes off in my mind, when I'm doing the movie in my head, the one thing that's not happening, my world disappears, right? The thing that's not, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I want a little respite from my difficult world. So I look forward to seeing this sort of rewritten with some more concrete language, and hopefully I'll see it in January.
Otis, exactly. This is about goddess Durga. Like I have humanized her. Like she's celebrated out in India throughout, but she's celebrated in my state. Like I stay in West Bengal in Kolkata, so she's supposed to be the daughter. So we all suffered from this from the past 2.5 years. So how she's coming back and how she's helping us out, like that is what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
So how she helping as a daughter, as a sister, as a mother, how she helps us out from this tragedy. So this is just a small portrayal of it, a short portrayal of it.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward to seeing some more, and then really developing those details of the town, specific people in specific time, engaging in specific action. It really does work to involve the reader. Anyway, great. Thank you for submitting it. And we better talk about Ashvani. I'm giving Ashvani the last spot because I know that he will graciously accept getting short shrift. I never know that expression. Ashvani, where are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Ashvani, how are you?
I'm great. And that famous dialogue of I thought you'd never ask, kind of a thing. So I was waiting for my turn.
Oh, I plan to have you be last all along. Believe me. Okay, some of these are probably too graphic for public consumption here. Where do I want you to read from? Okay, we're going to have you read the beginning. But just the very beginning. Let me read from here. Okay, maybe, so if you can just read between these two red lines, that would be great.
Okay. Half a century before that, and halfway across the globe, in a small town of North India, Urmila unwittingly traipsed into a polyamorous relation when she circumnavigated, tethered to her bridegroom, a mandapam, the sanctum sanctorum of Hindu wedding rituals, ostensibly endowed with divine power to guarantee an auspicious, fruitful, and happy married life. Literally carried away from her father's portico, her mother had left them for her heavenly abode during childbirth. In a palanquin festooned with flowers, largely marigold, she snivelled noisily into her handkerchief as she bade farewell to him and other relatives gathered for her wedding.
Nice, thank you. I like that. Great little detail. Tell us a little bit about this story, Ashwani.
Just sort of, I was reading about this word polyamorous and how it came about in 1990. And then, this story sort of just popped up in my mind. But when I started writing it, wasn't going to end up the way it did. Because when I reached about 750 words, and I thought to myself, now this is a stake which is just well done for Otis. And if I go to 1500 words, then it will be overdone. And if I go anywhere beyond that, it will be burnt. So I stopped at 1500 words. And that's why it's a bit awkward at the end. But that's what it is. I mean, the idea germinated from reading about that word.
The polyamorous, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. San Francisco in the 90s. Quite some time. I can almost guarantee it didn't work out for anybody. I'm not sure that one works out. I think there was a play about this called, I already referenced it with Rashma, No Exit. I think that was a polyamorous relationship. And it's also where the phrase "hell is other people" was coined. So, yeah. So, this is a wonderfully detailed story. At times, quite graphic. I think I would, if you want to work on and develop this story, and it's not, if you're not just thinking about it as an exercise, I think the issue is to get even more into Urmila's experience, basically. So, what happens here, and particularly, at the beginning is, she's very sort of roughly treated, right, by Prim, the husband. They find themselves childless, and then he seems to impose himself upon a servant. Does that sound right?
That's right.
So that's all pretty difficult stuff. What I find, sort of like if I cast around at stories generally and do my general litmus test, is that you know, and Hollywood is largely responsible for this too, and storytelling in general, is that, you know, terrible things happen to women, but we don't usually get involved and humanize the woman enough, right? They're sort of, it's like we just witness horrible things happening to women, but we don't really understand it from their perspective. And I think that that's probably the place to go with this work. I mean, there's, you know, two women are really, you know, very abused by a system in which the, you know, Prim has seemingly complete power over them. And I think that, you know, you have this little section here where Urmila is basically like, what could she do? You know, right? You write like she couldn't go home, right? That really affected me, you know, like, you know, the life that she would go to, it seems to me, would be worse even than the life that she has. That's quite something. And then you also, at the end, you come to this point where she writes a diary, and that might have been a little bit of a, you know, the Deus Ex Machina is coming in, you know, coming from the ceiling to tie everything up for us. But I think, you know, there's a further place to go to develop like the impulse to write her experience in a situation in which she's completely isolated and alone. You know, it seems like. I mean, what's sort of illustrated to her about life and power relationships is quite daunting, right? I mean, she has no power over her own life except for to find some place of, I guess, tolerance or acceptance of it. It's quite miserable. So I think there's a place to go further with sort of understanding her relationship. And yeah, like you say, now you're sort of coming into it with this kind of the polyamory is the thing that led you into it. But I would cut that away and not worry about it. You know, that's an intellectual thing, right? So you came into it with the intellect and with language, and I think I would probably, you know, what you're depicting of this woman's experience is profound and difficult. And I think the place to go is to sort of further explore her experience, not just as a kind of violence and power that's engaged upon her, but from her perspective, being the person in which that kind of power is being expressed upon her. But I want to point out that our conversation of this story is at a very high level, because you see that I'm not talking about Urmila as a person who, I'm talking about her as a human being, right? I'm talking about her as a human being in an actual place who's actually had experiences and who does something out of those experiences. All of those things make sense. I totally believe her as a character. And I hope that you will appreciate how that is the level. Appreciate that that's a very high level, right? I'm not saying that this is a generic character. I'm not saying that this is a character that I don't believe exists. I'm not saying that this is a world I don't believe exists. I'm saying I believe all of those things. So you've done that work. If I'm here as my reader and I want to abandon my world and go into another world, you have created that other world. That, you know, let's see, when you say half a century before that, so we're going to 1940s. 40s?
Yes.
So you're going into 1940s, a small town in northern India. I would love to have the name of that town, but and I would love to have more of the town, but you've taken me back to time, location, and with a character that I absolutely believe as being unique. And I totally, completely will commit to reading about her experience. Now you just have to basically engage in the experience of writing her both in her point of view, and your writing is also at a very high level, writing in her point of view, but make sure that you get into her head, right? So that you're her. Right now, terrible things happen to her, but I just witness them. I want more of her humanity to come out, so I don't feel like I'm just witnessing horrible things happening to women. I want to feel like I'm participating in the experience closely. I mean, I will still be safe. Yeah, I'll still be safe, but I think that this is, you have to think about whether you want to, when we do difficult work like this will be, we want to make choices. We can write about a lot of things, but if you feel like you want to commit to writing this character's story, I think you have a tremendous story to write here. And I also think that you can write it. So it'll be up to you if you pursue it or not, but I was in. That's my greatest praise is that I was in.
Thank you.
Okay, and
Thank you.
Haschemyer, as you already know, that I would gladly spend not just minutes in my day, but hours, days, even perhaps months reading your work. You're a fine writer, and so get to work, Haschemyer.
Thank you, Otis. Thank you.
I need books. I need books to read. Books that I like. I can't find them. Okay, so I'm counting on you.
Thank you. Those are very kind
it's
words.
A really great story.
Thank you.
You have a great character. So you have a great character. You have a great location, and you have a great time period. You have created a fabulous world with other characters, and Prim is just this sort of horrible, I mean, but maybe not. Whatever, he's also driven by his demons too, and his need to have progeny and all of that. So he has some, and then you also have this other woman that becomes involved and moves into the house. I mean, the whole thing is really really great.
Thank you.
All right, I think we covered everything.
Okay, wonderful. So folks, this is it for the remainder of the year. We've had, since we began this series, I believe this is the 41st session. So there are several 50 plus hours of videos that are available up there on YouTube, and this one will also be put up on YouTube. So do go through them in the next couple of months. Take that feedback that you have got on your pieces and put those into practice, and we will reconvene in January, so most likely in the first week, but we'll know for sure. We'll nail those dates down sometime in the second half of December. So 9th of January is what Otis is saying. So we'll anyway reconfirm closer to the end of the year. One question that I had for you, Otis, was when should people start sending you their pieces? Because given that you'll be busy with your own schedules and all for the next several weeks.
Yeah, so it looks to me, looking ahead to January, and I look forward to us all getting back together. Don't send me anything before the 3rd of January. I'm trying to take everything off my plate. I'm hurting people's feelings. I'm telling people I cannot see them. I've gotten off of Facebook. Thank God. Thank you. No more Facebook. Everything is gone. I'm just going to be concentrating on my own work. So, and I try not. I've even been unsubscribing from email lists, even ones that I care about. Unsubscribe. So, Yeah, the 3rd of January, I'll look forward to reading something, and then I look forward to seeing everyone on the 9th.
On the 9th of January. Perfect. So thank you, Otis, a lot for all your sessions, your feedback. Thank you, everyone who have submitted their pieces and have taken away that feedback. And best wishes for the holiday season, for Christmas, for New Year, Otis, and we will see you in the new year.
Okay.
Thank you, Otis.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Aniba.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank you,
Thanks for
everyone.
coming.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.